Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topic for tonight is waiting, waiting, waiting. What are we waiting for? We are waiting for retaliation by the axis of resistance against the state of Israel for the assassination campaign it's been carrying out, and in particular, for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the leading negotiator for Hamas, who was visiting Tehran at the time of his assassination in order to attend the inauguration of the new president of Iran. And he was killed in his hotel room, reportedly by an explosive device, which was placed there by Mossad. So Iran had said it would retaliate significantly for that the retaliation would be a significant event, that it would hurt Israel, and that was now some time ago. And we have been waiting and waiting. And the signs all point to an attack over the next day, 2 or 3. So I thought what we would do in this stream is to think about how they might attack. Well, first of all, in the attack they carried out in April in retaliation for the Israeli hit on their consulate in Syria, what they did is they launched, with plenty of warning, they were advertising, promoting that they were going to launch a big attack on Israel. Their purpose was to show the Israelis that they would not be able to defend themselves against an attack. So they launched 350 flying objects. I forget the exact numbers now. The majority of those objects were drones. They also launched something like 120 cruise missiles and a smaller number of actual ballistic missiles. They were launching the drones in order to reduce or end the effectiveness of the Iron Dome. Hello, Dee. How are you tonight? And they were very successful at that. They launched the cruise missiles to do some minor damage. And they launched roughly 9 ballistic missiles. And from what I've heard and read, those 9 ballistic missiles all hit their targets in Israel, their intended targets, and the Iron Dome and various other defenses, including defenses that were put up by the United States and the allies of Israel. Something like 7 different air defense systems. In spite of all those systems, the 9 ballistic missiles launched by Iran got through. I know something about their capability, okay, in Iran. And I know that they could have launched easily in that attack in April 3,500 flying objects and as many as 90 ballistic missiles and 1,200 cruise missiles. They could have multiplied that attack. Okay. In other words, by 10. By 10, it would have been easy for them to do. They did not do that because what they were trying to show Israel was their deterrent power. They were trying to show Israel that they had deterrence dominance. I think theirs was a pretty successful demonstration, okay, in April. But the problem with trying to show somebody that you have deterrence dominance is that it doesn't take into account the possibility that the people that you're showing it to really don't care whether you have that dominance or not, because what their aim is to start a war, okay, against you so that they can pull in some of their allies to help them. In the case of Israel, their purpose increasingly seems to be to start a war that is large and severe enough that the United States feels it incumbent upon them, or upon us, since I'm obviously part of the United States, to reply, to join Israel, to get involved in the wider war. Now, so far, the United States has avoided joining in a wider war, but the Israelis keep on pushing it. The indication being that they don't care about the deterrence dominance, okay, of Iran. What they care about is their ability to bring the United States in, because then they think they can win a war against Iran and the axis of resistance. Since the Israeli provocations, there's considerable evidence, okay, that Iran and all its allies in the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Iraqi resistance, and also the Syrian resistance, that all of those resistance elements are planning a coordinated attack, okay, against Israel. And that's the retaliation we have been expecting. I mentioned before that it would have been possible for the Iranians to launch 3,500 objects, okay, in April. I think it's also perfectly possible that Hezbollah would be able to launch perhaps 600 rockets against Israel, and the other resistance parties perhaps another 200 all told. So we might be talking about close to 4,500 flying objects coming, okay, at Israel. The question then becomes, where in Israel will they go? Well, the Houthis have the capability, we now know, to strike at 1,600 yards away. I'm sorry, 1,600 miles away. What am I talking about? Yards. 1,600 miles. Of course, the Iranians have certainly an equal or greater capability, and Hezbollah as well has an equal or greater capability. So, based on the available rockets and missiles and drones, the coming attacks could be anywhere, okay, inside of Israel. So the question is, where do you suppose the Iranian retaliation will fall? Well, thus far, the Iranians have avoided civilian targets. They've been concentrating their fire on military targets. But what if they were to attack civilian targets in the West Bank? How would that go? What would the consequences of that be? I'm persuaded that the position of the Iranian missiles is such that they could target the West Bank settlements and not hit any Palestinian Arabs. I'm sorry, not hit any Palestinian areas. Their targeting is that accurate. I'm also persuaded that they could hit the big cities in Israel if they wanted to. Haifa, of course, okay, and Tel Aviv. They could hit also lots of military targets. What kind of warheads would they have? I believe they can deliver very heavy payloads on some of those warheads. Maybe warheads with explosive power of 2,000 pounds of explosives, 2,500 pounds. They could deliver very serious damages to Israeli cities and very serious damage to the settlers in the West Bank. Now, one thing that's limiting their ideas about where the target should be and what the targets ought to be is their calculation that they don't want to be so devastating that the United States believes it cannot stay out. So I'm going to put the question to everyone. If they restricted their attacks just to the settlements in the West Bank and they didn't attack anywhere else, but their attacks had severe consequences for the West Bank settlers, so severe that they took off of Ben Gurion Airport and left in droves to go back where they came from. Would the United States be drawn into the war if that kind of attack took place? I honestly don't know. It's not as if the attack would be on Israel proper. It would be an attack on the West Bank, the occupied lands, the illegally occupied lands according to international law. So, what would be the excuse for the United States to join with Israel in avenging such an attack? What would be our interest? After all, we've always maintained that the settlements in the West Bank are illegal. We recognize they are illegal. So if the Iranians decided to make them not only illegal, but downright dangerous and insecure for colonizers, wouldn't those colonizers just leave? And what position would the rulers that be take when it comes to attacks on the settlements? They've recognized the settlements are illegal. The UN recognizes the settlements are illegal. Everybody recognizes in international law, except for Israel itself, that the occupiers should not be there. This is an illegal occupation. So, here's Israel. It would come to the United States and it would say, we need your help in repelling an attack on the settlements in the occupied areas, or as they'd like to call it, on the settlements in Judea and Samaria. And wouldn't we have to say, well, you have a right to defend yourself, and we'll always be at your side when it comes to defending yourself. But when it comes to defending your citizens living in the occupied areas, it seems to me it's very hard for us to justify that, because that's not an attack on Israel. That's an attack on the occupied West Bank areas that, according to international law, belong to the Palestinians. Now, we can go as far as helping you to defend those areas against their attack. But we can't conduct a war, against Iran because they retaliated in the occupied areas without bombing Israel proper. We have no rationale for that. We can help if they bomb Israel itself, if they threaten the existence of Israel itself. But if all they do is to threaten the existence of the settlers in the occupied areas, I don't think we've ever enunciated a policy saying that we would protect them. Oh, we would protect the Israeli occupation in those areas. Now we know you'll build a case and there'll be a lot of propaganda calling for us to help you fight to protect the defenseless settlers. But we know the settlers aren't exactly defenseless. They've been getting armed now by Ben Gvir and his cohorts for years. They've got some of the latest armaments. They're not really defenseless. So why would we defend them as opposed to just you? This gives us difficulties in justification. We're going to have to unleash major propaganda campaigns to justify this if they retaliate in this way. So maybe we can't help you. Maybe we won't help you. We would have a big political cell back home if you retaliated by trying to drive the settlers out of their West Bank settlements. Anyway, I have no way of knowing if the Iranians are planning to do that. I, of course, have no contacts with them whatsoever. I don't even have contacts with nations that have contacts with them. I don't happen to write for any Russian publications or Russian owned publications or Russian funded publications. All I do are my streams here, and they're not supported by the Russians or the Chinese or any foreign power. So I'm certainly not involved in delivering and getting paid for propaganda on behalf of a foreign power. But I'm just saying, if I were me, if I were them, I should say, I am me, of course, but if I were them, I would certainly go after the settlers, okay, in the West Bank. Why would I do that? Well, because the Israelis have gone after the Gazans. What right did they have to go after the Gazans? Some may say they had a right to go after Hamas, but only in a proportionate way, and the way they've gone after it is so disproportionate. Also, there's nothing the Iranians can do about what the Israelis have already done to Gaza. They've destroyed shelters, residences, infrastructures, huge numbers of people. There would be no point of Iran retaliating by firing At Gaza. No, their targets have to be Israel, okay, or the West Bank. Now, if they fired civilians, okay, at Israel, it would be much easier for the West to condemn them. On the other hand, if they only fired at military targets inside of Israel, then it would be less easy for the West to condemn them because it's only retaliation, right? And Israel had acted first. So maybe the West wouldn't be so free to propagandize that they had done something inhuman by retaliating against the military in Israel. But on the other hand, if they only retaliated against the military in Israel, then the question is, what kind of political effect is that going to have on the Israelis? On the other hand, if they were to retaliate against the West Bank settlers who should not even be there, I know the Israelis would complain. I know the United States would complain. But really, what grounds for complaint would they have? Those settlers shouldn't even be there. But just look at the political advantages. If you attack those settlers and you make it clear to them that their settlements will soon be uninhabitable, they're going to skedaddle. Many of them are dual citizens. They're going to go back where they came from. There are 800,000 of them. If 500,000 of them go back where they came from, that changes the political situation, okay, in Israel. The right wing in Israel would no longer have a majority in the Knesset. I mean, their voters would be gone. So their members of the Knesset would be gone pretty quickly too. And then it would be curtains for the Netanyahu government and curtains for any right-wing government. What would happen is a non-right-wing government would take over in Israel. Now, we know they're no angels. We know they're no angels. But we also know that they're capable of recognizing when they're beaten from the capability and armed forces standpoint. They recognize now that without the help of the United States, they cannot win in Lebanon against Hezbollah. They know right now they can't win against Hamas in Gaza. They might even know right now they can't win against Iran, that they're outgunned, they're outmanned. They might therefore want to sit down and negotiate not just a ceasefire, but a lasting peace, and finally a two-state solution. Now, it would be a two-state solution at the barrel of a gun. No doubt about that. But the Israelis would still have a big army to defend them, a very capable air force, okay, to defend them. And if the Israelis were no longer attacking every other nation in Western Asia in order to convince the United States to join them, as I think a new Israeli government, which was a non-right-wing government, would be sensible enough to do, then surely the Israeli armed forces could provide a measure of security against the new Palestinian state itself. I think the Israelis could be pretty sure that the new Palestinian state would not be attacking them. Now, maybe they won't be so sure. I don't know. But it seems to me Iran doesn't really want war with Israel. They've been trying to avoid, okay, a regional war. Hezbollah has been trying to avoid, okay, a wider war. And the Houthis have said that if there's a ceasefire there, they'll stop attacking Israel or the Israelis. Probably if there was a two-state solution and a genocide were to stop, the Houthis would begin tending to their own business. And the main threats against Israel, which Israel itself had created, would probably be gone. Gone with the wind, maybe gone even within a short time. Maybe the Israelis could then turn to making business deals with their neighbors. I think they can offer a lot of new technology to their neighbors. They're reputed to be pretty good at new technology, other than simply military technology. If they were to help the Palestinians develop and the Palestinian state, okay, to thrive, that might heal quite a lot of the wounds. If they were to pay reparations to people they've attacked and displaced for so many years, if they were to pay compensation for all the outrages, that might help to bring about a peaceful settlement also. I think the big problem is those 800,000 settlers. And if this retaliation could get rid of them, then maybe there would be a basis for peace, okay, in the Middle East. Anybody disagrees? I urge you to let me know, because I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. I'd love to argue it out. I think there are arguments on the other side. I think there are probably good arguments on the other side. But I think my proposal here is actually a pretty compelling one. Let's consider the alternatives. How else should the Iranians retaliate? Should they assassinate a few of the Israeli leaders? They might be able to do that by directing rockets towards the proper buildings. They might be able to do that. But remember, it's not simply a matter of deterring the Israelis, because their objective is to get the United States involved. That's the objective of their current government. That's the objective of the right wing: get the United States to save them so they can go ahead with their plans to build the greater Israel. I don't see that assassination is going to help with that. It'll be a tit for tat. And the Israelis would get upset, but they might simply climb the ladder of continuous hit and be hit until finally got things out of control. They may want to further climb up the ladder of escalation. But I don't know that assassinations of their people, while reciprocal in terms of what the Israelis have done, I don't know that that solves the political problem inside of Israel. The political problem that's driving Israel is this problem of the crazy settlers. Settlers who want to do what the Bible says. Settlers who want to do what they think they are fated to do by their holy scriptures. They have different perspectives from people who are pragmatic and who are practical. Their perspectives are highly religious and fanatic, in many ways. They think they're on a mission from God. And even though the rest of the world doesn't think so, they think so, and they're willing to go the whole way with it. But if you take away 800,000 of those people, then maybe over a short period of time you get a different Israel. John B. correctly says Palestine's gathering allies are just too powerful. Israel, Lebanon, Russia, and China well know that their background support would bleed the U.S. dry. Ukraine is already dying from U.S. incapacity to supply arms. From the standpoint of Iran, they really don't want to fight a long war against Israel. They really want to deter Israel. My point is that you cannot deter a messianic Israel. Cannot deter a messianic country It's trying to fulfill a biblical prophecy. But if you get rid of the 800,000 of their people who believe that, and leave them with only a few 100,000 more who believe that, you can get a political situation in Israel which will leave the Iranians and the Lebanese and the Iraqis and the Syrians in peace. And that's what the proposed attack or retaliation against the West Bank settlers would do. It would change the political situation on the ground. It would change Israeli intentions, I think, and it would pave the way for negotiating a peace. So I'll wait for some more comments. But I want to offer that proposal again, tonight. I'll go on to another subject, at least for a few minutes. We all are aware by now that Scott Ritter's house was raided by the FBI. He has not been arrested, but they seized a bunch of his records. And the Department of Justice is probably trying to compile a case against him based on their access to his records. He has a video answer to them out tonight. I can't take the time to go over that. It would take too long. There's also an article at uns.com about that by Phil Giraldi, which I commend to you. Of course, what I have to say about that is it's an extreme violation of civil liberties. It's an obvious attempt to shut Scott up. The Foreign Agents the Registration Act, or FARA, gives them no justification in the case of Scott, in my view, to try to harass him or to try to shut him up. In any case, his answer earlier tonight shows that he's not going to shut up about this. And of course, I don't think that any of us expected him to. So he is going on. He is condemning the government. Certain others are condemning the government also. In Phil Giraldi's article at uns.com, his is entitled, "There is Something Rotten in Washington." It's a good piece. I will put it in the comments so you can have access to it. There it is. So you can take a look, if you want. Of course, this article is very, very correct. It's a very good piece. It attacks the government on constitutional grounds. It's a fairly lengthy piece, 2,000 words. It ends with the following paragraph. One might well suggest the Biden administration stop harassing ordinary Americans who are exercising their free speech right to critique unnecessary wars and instead go after the the lobby, which is a major contributing factor to why those wars are taking place at all. It would also be nice to end the hypocrisy that surrounds anything having to do with Israel and Washington. The country is no democracy, no ally, and it is a major league war criminal with possibly hundreds of thousands of dead Palestinians as evidence of its genocidal inclinations. Several hundred congressmen cheering war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu do not change that. Apart from anything else that the United States is involved in, sustaining and providing cover for the slaughter of thousands of innocents, while also pursuing its own citizens who are saying, "Thou shalt not," quote unquote, is an abomination. Phil Giraldi is a PhD. He's the executive director of the Council for the National Interest, a 501c3 tax-deductible educational foundation that seeks a more interest-based U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. His website is councilforthenationalinterest.org. The address is P.O. Box 2157, Purcellville, Virginia, which, by the way, is quite near me. It must be only about, 15, 20 miles away. And its email is inform@cnionline.org. Or cnion.line. Or cnionline.org, I should say. So, I suggest you read that. It's a good piece. My plans for the rest of this week are John B. says, since when do civil liberties apply in the U.S., Joe? The First Amendment is defied by government. In fact, the U.S. Constitution may as well not exist. Well, I won't go that far, John B., but I take your point. Civil liberties in the United States are violated every day. Our governments no longer respect civil liberties. That is because the courts will not find against the government when it comes to civil liberties lawsuits. I think freedom of assembly, not just freedom of speech, but freedom of assembly, the right to freely assemble, is freely violated by local governments, including the DC local government. All kinds of constraints are put on people that are not constitutional. I think the Supreme Court itself is violating the Constitution. It just installed a right to presidential immunity for crimes, which is undoubtedly causing the founders to turn over in their graves. If there was any one thing they did not want, it was presidential immunity against prosecution. That's plain in the text of the Constitution. And as soon as we get a new bunch in the Supreme Court there, they're certainly going to find that the 6 justices who voted in favor of immunity were way off base. How are we going to do that? Well, I have my own path, John B., which is if we get a successful dump the corruption campaign, then surely we will have a new Congress which is unbought, and then we can pass laws to buttress our civil liberties, including laws that pack the Supreme Court with 6 more justices, so that the 6 justices who are so far off base are simply neutralized, soon after which they will undoubtedly retire once they realize they have no influence at all over the future course of the Supreme Court. So on that note, I'm going to start to close the show. I did want to say that I'll be back on Saturday night with another stream. I won't be here tomorrow. I still have more work to do and more things to do, which precludes my doing 4 shows a week. But I can do 3, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. How long my Saturday show will be, I don't know. In part, that's going to depend on Dee. If she wants to go at 9 o'clock on Saturday, I'll probably go at 8 p.m. again. Or if she wants to go at 8 p.m., then I will go at 9. So she and I will work that out. If she doesn't want to go at all, then I will go at 9 on Saturday night. So thank you all for coming. My hour is nearly up. And so I will say good night, so I have time to get over and help Dee with her stream. So thank you all very much. John B. says, citizens cannot beat the billion-dollar sponsorship of U.S. governance. As Supreme Court judges retire, they will be replaced by more board judges. No, John B., not if a dump the corruption campaign is successful. Of course, we all know that's a tall order, but there is a simple rule that voters can follow. I will be continuing to lobby for that rule and for that campaign. And hopefully, over the next 2 years, my efforts will finally bear fruit. And we shall see. We shall see whether I can get that campaign going. If I can get it going, there will be an entirely new Congress. None of the new Congress will be beholden to big money because simply because if people follow the voting rule I have, they won't be voting for anybody who takes big money. And right now, that's almost the whole of the present Congress. I think it is the present Congress. We went over the records of 205 people in the Senate and House, and not a single one wasn't taking big money. So all of them would be swept aside in such a campaign. They would all be replaced by new people who were not taking big money. And of course, if such a Congress were to pass, were to expand the court by 6 justices, and the president was also subject to this voting rule, then we would get a president who is not beholden to big money as well. And so the president and Congress would then appoint justices who are not beholden to big money. There are judges out there who are not bought. For example, it's pretty obvious that Judge Tanya Batchutkin of the U.S. District Court is not bought. John B. says, you can't beat the criminal syndicates, Joe. I see no course. John B. says, if you prove to be a threat to them, Joe, you will be taken out. Maybe so, John B., but I think that they will be surprised by the success of a Dump the Corruption campaign when it comes upon them. And I, of course, by that time, will not be the only leader of the Dump the Corruption campaign. There will be many leaders. I am just a lone streamer. There will be many more streamers. And there will be many lawyers of this self-organizing campaign. That's the way I'm designing it. It's designed around the rule about how people should vote. Okay. Anyone can champion the rule. Anyone can stream about it. Anyone can put together organizations, political organizations, which would be dedicated, to the rule. If they take me out, it would not help them. That is my best guarantee, of safety. Lana says they're treating Ritter similar to Stephen Donziger. It's Don Ziger, actually, I believe. I don't think it's Don Zinger, Lana. But let me say that I don't know if they're treating him in exactly the same way. With him, they put his prosecution out to basically private prosecutors, or prosecutors that were selected by corporations. They're not going to treat Scott, in that way. John B. says, I didn't mean that comment personal, Joe. The problems are systemic. The problems are systemic. But what you have to recognize, John B., is the Dump the Corruption campaign is a systemic solution. It isn't a personal solution. Lana says, that judge was bought by the oil company. That's right. But that judge was also selected by the oil company, not just bought by the oil company, selected by the oil company. I say it because Ritter, they were trying to shut him up. I know. I know they were trying to shut him up. But they're going to have to prove in his case that he should have registered under the FARA. They're going to have to prove that in court. He will have plenty of people supporting him, and his case will become a cause as big as Julian Assange. I don't think they'll have an easy time of shutting him up, nor do I think they're going to shut up all of his friends. They may stop other people by traveling to Russia to try to make friends. But that problem may be over in a very short time. We'll have to see. Don't think the war in Ukraine is going to go on forever. I don't think this foreign policy of the United States is going to go on forever. Alana says, I hope he doesn't rot in jail for years like Julian. Ugh. Well, I don't think they're going to be able to jail him. They have to convict him before they can jail him. In Julian's case, they didn't have to convict him because of his particular circumstances. He ran. He didn't want to stand trial in some kind of military court under the Espionage Act. But I don't think the government is bringing to bear the Espionage Act in Scott's case. The act they're trying him under is FAR. I hope he doesn't rot in jail for years like Julian also. Okay, I got to get over to D's. If D's show doesn't run too late, I will have time to chat for a bit after D's show. In fact, I'm seriously considering only going over to D's show for an hour or so. Anyway. If Ukraine throws in the towel, it would look bad for NATO. I believe that's part of the reason it is still going on. Well, that's a lot of the reason that it's still going on. But what I'm telling you is I don't think NATO is going to have a choice because I think the Ukrainian military will soon collapse and the Russians will take over in Kyiv and appoint a puppet that they'll be able to negotiate with. That'll be that, even if it looks bad for NATO. Lana says, okay, good night. Yes. Okay, good night, everyone. Please follow me over to D Stream. Around the World with D and Friends on YouTube.